Welcome to a brand new deep dive. And to you, the learner listening to this right now, we are just so thrilled you're here.
Absolutely. So glad you're joining us.
Yeah, because whether you are, prepping for a corporate board meeting or maybe trying to keep a local neighborhood coalition from totally imploding.
Or just managing a chaotic family dynamic.
Right. Honestly, even if you're just incredibly curious about how human beings actually manage to work together without destroying each other, we have a very specific mission today.
We really do.
We are going to unpack this profound, and I mean deeply misunderstood, difference between true unity and the dangerous illusion of uniformity.
It's such a massive distinction.
It is. And we're pulling all of this entirely from a comprehensive, just fascinating manuscript titled Unity Without Uniformity. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So the central premise of this text challenges a fundamental assumption that, well, most of us don't even realize we hold.
Right, like a blind spot.
Exactly. We operate under this modern belief that for a movement or a business or an organization to be healthy and survive, everyone inside it needs to look, act, and think exactly the same.
Yeah, we totally equate sameness with strength.
We really do. We assume that if people are, using the exact same corporate jargon, dressing the same way, and basically just mirroring the leader's personality, then the organization is impenetrable.
You see this literally everywhere.
Oh, constantly.
You look at a group, maybe it's a slick tech startup or a political action committee, and on paper, they look like this perfectly synchronized machine.
Right. Flawlessly aligned.
Yeah, but then they hit one unexpected crisis. Just one moment of real, sustained pressure, and the whole thing just shatters overnight.
Just crumble.
And the diagnosis is always so murky, isn't it? It's not like looking at a medical x-ray where a broken bone shows up as this clean, jagged white line.
No, not at all. When human movements break, the fracture is almost always internal. It's quiet.
It's invisible until it's way too late.
And that's why the manuscript we're diving into provides such a remarkable lens for understanding those invisible fractures.
It really gives you x-ray vision for organizations.
It does. Though I should note right up front that the source material draws really heavily on Christian leadership, theology, and ecclesiology.
Which is basically the study of how churches function and govern themselves, right?
Exactly. But the underlying mechanics it explores regarding authority, trust, and, why human beings pull apart, it offers an absolute masterclass in organizational psychology for literally anyone.
Yeah, we're going to impartially explore the author's theological framework to really understand these universal human tendencies that either build up or completely destroy a shared mission.
Precisely. So, to really understand why movements break down, we first have to completely redefine what togetherness actually means.
Right, because our default definition is usually wrong.
Exactly. The text draws a very hard line right out of the gate. It says unity is a spiritual relational alignment,
Okay.
whereas uniformity is a managerial obsession with sameness.
Managerial obsession. Wow, that is such a great phrase.
It's descriptive, right? And the psychology behind that managerial obsession is deeply rooted in our hatred of uncertainty.
Oh, sure. Humans hate not knowing what's next.
Exactly. We naturally default to enforcing uniformity because it minimizes friction. If everyone on your team uses the identical vocabulary and the exact same problem-solving instincts, well, the system feels stable.
It feels safe.
Right. From a leadership perspective, it looks incredibly efficient. You don't have to translate across different communication styles.
You don't have to navigate conflicting priorities or weird interpersonal quirks.
Exactly. But the text argues that uniformity produces compliance without conviction.
Wait, compliance without conviction. I love that. But that efficiency is a total trap, isn't it?
It's a huge trap.
It really reminds me of the difference between a factory and a garden.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. Walk me through that.
Well, a factory is the ultimate expression of uniformity.
Yeah.
The entire goal is standardized output. Every single widget on the assembly line must look exactly like the widget before it. If a widget comes out even slightly different, it's defective.
You throw it out.
Yeah, you trash it. The system is literally designed to eliminate variance. But a garden operates on a completely different paradigm.
A living paradigm.
Exactly. A garden produces living diversity. You have tomato plants that require full, blazing hot sun and a specific soil pH.
Right, they need the heat.
Yeah, but right next to them, you might have ferns that will literally wither and die if they get too much light. They need deep shade and lots of moisture.
They are completely different in their needs and their outputs.
Exactly, but they are both participating in the shared life of the exact same garden. They thrive because of their environment, not because they're the same plant.
And the manuscript uses a very similar paradigm to argue that applying that factory mindset to a human community produces compliance, but it completely hollows out the soul of the organization.
It just starves the talent.
It shrinks the richness of the perspective that actually exists within that community. Uniformity demands, speak like us, lead like us, decide like us.
It's a cloning facility.
Right. But biblical unity, as defined by the text, demands something significantly more complex. It says you need to stay anchored to the exact same core purpose, but allow wildly different gifts, expressions, and methodologies to actually flourish.
Right, which brings in this ancient, brilliant imagery the author references from the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 12.
The body metaphor.
Yes, the metaphor of the human body. The text emphasizes that the human body isn't healthy because every single cell or organ behaves like every other organ.
That would be a tumor, actually.
Exactly. The body possesses strength, specifically because of its profound differences. Paul writes that the eye cannot look at the hand and say, I have no need of you.
Because the body is strong, because it is different. The text really pushes that metaphor beyond just interpersonal tolerance. It presents a theology of mutual dependence. The eye isn't embarrassed that it can't grasp an object. The hand isn't punished for not being able to see.
They just do what they're designed to do.
Right. Each part contributes according to its unique, specialized design. The variance is not a flaw to be corrected by management.
It's evidence of profound wisdom in the design. But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Because when you bring this into the reality of actually managing people or running an organization, that sounds incredibly chaotic.
It can definitely feel that way.
Right. Like if the eye is doing eye things over here and the hand is off doing hand things over there and the foot is walking in a completely different direction, how do you avoid total organizational collapse?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah. How is this not just a recipe for everyone pulling in different directions? If I'm a leader and I just let everyone operate entirely on their own instincts, I don't have a garden. I have a jungle where everything is strangling everything else.
What's fascinating here is that this is the exact tension the source material addresses. True biblical unity is not chaotic individualism.
Okay, thank goodness.
Yeah, it is not a free-for-all where everyone just pursues their own truth. The text describes it as the sanctification of difference under a much higher allegiance.
Sanctification of difference, meaning it's made holy or purposed.
Yes, it is harmony created by grace and shared purpose, rather than sameness manufactured by external pressure.
Wow.
Consider a symphony orchestra. If every musician plays the exact same note at the exact same volume, you have uniformity.
Which is just a flat drone. It's annoying.
Exactly. But if musicians are playing entirely different instruments, executing entirely different rhythms and notes, but they are mathematically and harmonically related to a single shared composition, then you achieve a symphony.
So the chaos is prevented by the shared composition. The center has to hold.
Precisely. A leader who mistakes alignment for control will eventually become incredibly anxious and brittle.
Because they're trying to control every single note.
Right. When you demand uniformity, every independent thought feels like an act of disloyalty. If someone leads a project differently than the founder would have, or emphasizes a different metric for success, the factory mindset assumes they are rebelling.
And that paranoia is exactly how you get managed fragmentation.
Yes. The organization slowly compresses until only clones of the founder remain.
Okay, so if true unity is this delicate balance of diverse parts moving together like a symphony, we have to look at the ultimate blueprint for this kind of connection, which leads us directly to the missional logic of John 17 in the text.
And this section completely reframes the whole conversation.
It really does. Because unity is not just a soft decorative virtue, is it?
No, the author makes a compelling argument that unity is not just a private feeling. It's not just the pleasant vibe of everyone getting along at the company retreat.
Right, eating trust falls and trail mix.
Exactly. It is a structural missional necessity. It is public evidence of the message.
Think about the context of John 17. Jesus is literally hours away from the cross.
The stakes could not be higher.
Right. He is facing betrayal, arrest, torture, execution. He knows. His followers are going to scatter in absolute terror. The movement is about to face the ultimate stress test.
And in that moment, what does he pray for?
Exactly. He doesn't pray for a more robust organizational strategy. He doesn't pray for financial resources or political cover or, institutional expansion.
No, he prays for oneness.
He prays that they may all be one, so that the world may believe.
The manuscript zeroes in on that specific phrase, so that the world may believe.
Because that's the apologetic. That's the proof.
Yes, Jesus binds the credibility of the entire message to the quality of the community's communion. The text asserts that a divided community preaching a gospel of peace is a massive theological contradiction.
It makes no sense.
Right. The outside world does not judge the truth of the message by its intellectual elegance. They watch the relationships within the movement.
To see if the message is actually true. If the gospel truly has the power to reconcile human beings to God, it absolutely must demonstrate the power to reconcile human beings to one another.
And the deepest, most foundational pattern for this, according to the text, is the Trinity itself.
Right, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Exactly. In Christian theology, God is three distinct persons, yet one God. The author highlights that within the Trinity, there is distinction without division.
Wow.
There is perfect relationship without fracture, jealousy, or competition. That is the deepest pattern of Christian unity. It is not about flattening three entities into one identical, indistinguishable blob.
No, it is about perfect love and shared life, holding distinct persons in an unbreakable bond. But bringing this to a practical level, you really can't fake that bond.
You really can't. People see right through it.
We've all seen staged corporate harmony. Two executives who literally despise each other are forced to stand together for a press release photo, smiling and shaking hands.
Or rival departments exchanging polite passive-aggressive emails.
Yes. Per my last email. That kind of artificial unity is so brittle. As soon as the budget gets cut or a real crisis hits, the smiles vanish and the knives come out.
Because a staged display of harmony won't survive pressure.
The text insists that unity has to be spiritually and emotionally real before it can be publicly convincing.
And achieving that reality requires immense psychological endurance. It requires, as the text puts it, dying to the ego.
Which is incredibly hard.
It demands the maturity to distinguish between essential convictions and secondary preferences. If the unity is merely an administrative agreement, it will silently shatter from the inside out the moment genuine differences arise.
Which brings us to the next massive question. If oneness is the goal, and it's the most convincing force a movement can possess, why is it so incredibly rare?
That is the tragic reality the text confronts next.
Right. What actually causes a shared mission to quietly fragment? Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because fragmentation rarely starts with open rebellion.
Rightly. It almost never starts with a villain twirling their mustache.
Exactly. No one stands up in a board meeting and announces, I am going to destroy this organization today out of sheer spite.
No, it usually sounds highly logical and responsible at first.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text dedicates a deeply sobering section to the danger of the owned ministry.
Yes, the hidden costs of fragmentation and how the noble concept of stewardship subtly mutates into toxic ownership.
And the language of separation is routinely disguised as wisdom, isn't it?
Oh, constantly. Leaders will start dropping phrases like, well, our local context is unique.
Or we just need more operational clarity.
Or the central office just doesn't understand the nuances of our specific department. Now, sometimes a context truly is unique.
Sure, occasionally that's true.
But the text argues that beneath those seemingly wise statements, a creeping territorialism often takes root. Leaders slowly begin to view the people, the budget, and the influence they manage as their own personal property.
Like owned spaces rather than entrusted fields.
Exactly. And that shift from stewardship to ownership changes every incentive.
Because if I believe I am merely stewarding a department, I understand it ultimately belongs to the larger organization, or in the text's context, to God.
Right. Your job is to cultivate it for the health of the whole.
But the second I believe I own that department, my primary instinct becomes protection. I build walls, I hoard resources, I make sure my name is on every single victory.
The author details several concrete symptoms of this territorial ownership. The first one is duplication as a form of inefficiency.
Duplication meaning recreating the wheel.
Exactly. Instead of collaborating, leaders will recreate training programs, marketing materials, and entire organizational structures from scratch.
Because they refuse to share resources with a neighboring branch.
Right. They want their specific brand stamped on the initiative. The text actually contrasts this modern silo building with the biblical narrative of Moses and his father-in-law, Jethro.
Oh, this is such a good story. Moses was completely exhausted, right?
Beyond exhausted, he was trying to judge every single dispute among the Israelites himself. He acted as the sole bottleneck of authority.
And Jethro intervenes and essentially gives him a masterclass in organizational restructuring.
Yes. He tells him to delegate the authority and distribute the burden. Moses had to surrender ownership of the process to actually fulfill the mission.
He had to let go. And another symptom the text highlights is comparison as envy. This one hits so close to home for anyone in leadership.
It is brutal.
It occurs when you start measuring your success by visibility and status rather than actual fruitfulness. It's that dark, quiet, sickening feeling where another leader's success genuinely feels like a subtraction from your own worth.
Yes. When another leader's success feels like a subtraction, if a rival department hits their quarterly goals or the church down the street doubles in size, you don't celebrate.
You feel diminished. You start looking for flaws in their methodology just to justify why they succeeded and you didn't.
And that zero-sum thinking is a direct result of ego. The text uses a really powerful historical and theological contrast to explain this. It compares the Tower of Babel to the day of Pentecost.
Okay, Babel versus Pentecost. Walk us through that.
Well, Babel was a massive, centralized attempt at unity. But it was unity without covenant. It was a forced, uniform coordination for the explicit purpose of self-glorification.
The builders literally said, "Let us make a name for ourselves."
Exactly. It was an ego-driven monolith. Rebellion for self-glory. Pentecost represents the absolute inverse.
Because at Pentecost, you had a wild decentralization, right?
Yes, diverse languages and cultures, but they were deeply united in a shared proclamation of God's works. It was a shared mission bigger than themselves.
Babel was like a CEO forcing everyone to adopt a toxic corporate monoculture to inflate the stock price. Pentecost was a diverse team bringing their unique cultural strengths to solve a shared problem.
Perfect analogy. And to bring this down to earth, the manuscript offers this brilliant thought experiment, the tale of two leaders.
Yes, the two pastors operating in the same city. Detail this narrative for us because it perfectly encapsulates the difference between a fortress and a field.
Okay, so let's look at the first leader. He runs his organization like an impenetrable fortress. He carefully controls all access to his team. He views every new initiative or startup in his city as a direct threat to his market share.
He's incredibly defensive.
Very. He duplicates successful models from other groups, but only so he can slap his own logo on them and keep his people from looking elsewhere.
And he probably praises other leaders in public to look magnanimous, but in private, he's obsessively comparing his metrics to theirs.
Exactly. Now, his organization might actually grow quite large, but the atmosphere inside is thin. It's anxious.
Because his subordinates don't share innovative ideas. They know he will either kill the idea if he can't control it, or he will steal it and hoard the credit.
Right. But then you observe the second leader. She operates her organization not as a walled fortress, but as an entrusted garden.
A garden. We're back to that metaphor.
Yes. She fundamentally understands she is not the source of life, merely the steward of it. Because she doesn't fear losing her turf, she welcomes outside counsel.
She freely shares her best tools, her templates, and even her key personnel with neighboring organizations if it serves the broader mission.
Exactly. She actively celebrates success wherever it blooms, even when her name is completely absent from the press release.
And her growth trajectory might look slower initially, but the organization develops massive depth, loyalty, and resilience.
Because in her ecosystem, collaboration is safe. Innovation thrives because trust is the baseline.
She is building a kingdom, while the first leader is just building an empire.
That's beautifully said.
But this garden model introduces a massive practical dilemma.
It does.
If you have a garden where everyone is sharing resources and diverse plants are growing in different ways, how do you keep the garden from losing its identity entirely?
Right. How does it not just turn into mush?
Exactly. The only way this fluid, collaborative model works is if everyone agrees on the absolute boundaries of the garden. You have to draw incredibly thick, clear lines around what cannot be compromised.
You cannot have a flexible edge without a rigid center.
Yes. Which brings us to section 4, the spine of the body, guarding the non-negotiables.
Every movement must know its absolute boundaries. The author argues fiercely that not everything is adaptable. Certain things are foundational, and guarding those foundations is an act of love, not control.
I love the spine analogy so much. Think about human anatomy.
Right.
You need a rigid, unyielding spine in order to have flexible, adaptable limbs. If you remove the spine, the body becomes a puddle on the floor, It completely collapses under its own weight.
It has no structure.
But if the body's only a spine, if every joint is fused and rigid, you are essentially a statue. You can't reach, you can't walk, you can't interact with the environment. You need the absolute rigidity of the center to support the total flexibility of the arms and legs.
And the text warns that losing that rigid center almost never happens intentionally. It happens through gradual drift.
Drift. It's so insidious.
It is. No leadership team wakes up on a Tuesday and votes to abandon their core founding principles. Drift happens through tiny, imperceptible concessions.
Right. A harsh truth in the mission statement is softened for PR purposes. A behavioral boundary is quietly ignored because the person crossing it is a high performer.
And eventually, the legacy language remains on the website, but the actual center of gravity has shifted entirely. Therefore, the truth must be guarded intentionally.
The author actually outlines 4 specific non-negotiables, the vertebrae of this spine. These are the elements that, if removed, cause the entire movement to collapse.
Right. The first vertebra is core doctrine. In the theological context of the manuscript, this includes the holiness of God, the sinfulness of humanity, the lordship of Christ, the authority of Scripture.
And the text makes a crucial clarification here, doesn't it? Orthodoxy, which means correct belief, is entirely hollow if it's divorced from obedience.
Yes. Orthodoxy without obedience is hollow. But without those foundational doctrines, the movement loses its actual identity and simply becomes a generic social club.
Okay, so that's the first. The second vertebra is disciple-making DNA. This is about the fundamental purpose of the organization.
It's forming apprentices, not just gathering crowds.
Yes. If you have a massive audience listening to your podcasts or attending your conferences, but no one's actual character is changing to reflect the core values, you aren't leading a movement.
You're just putting on an entertainment spectacle.
Exactly. What's the third one?
The third is a reproduction commitment. This requires generational thinking.
Planting orchards, not just gathering fruit.
Exactly. A healthy movement constantly reproduces its convictions and its leaders. It actively works to replace itself. A toxic organization hoards all the leadership and decision-making power at the center.
Creating a massive vacuum when the founder eventually leaves.
Exactly. And the fourth vertebra is kingdom orientation. This means the mission ultimately belongs to Christ.
Right. Not to a specific brand or a charismatic founder or a proprietary network.
Keeping this orientation prevents organizational success from becoming idolatrous. It reminds the team that they are servants of a larger narrative.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the listener? How do you practically guard these 4 essentials without turning into a paranoid tyrant who micromanages every single decision?
That is the fear, right?
It is. If I'm a mid-level manager and my boss tells me my job is to guard the non-negotiables, my immediate psychological instinct is to clamp down. I start policing everyone's tone in emails. I start demanding approval over every minor project variation.
You create a culture of walking on eggshells.
Exactly. How do we avoid that?
The manuscript offers a vital distinction to solve this. Guarding essentials is about protecting the essence, not defending the leader's ego.
Essence over ego.
Yes. It requires profound discernment to know the difference between first-order truths and third-order preferences.
Give me an example of that.
Well, first-order truths are the load-bearing walls, the reality of the resurrection, the ethical mandates of the organization, the core product promise. Third-order preferences are aesthetic, the style of music played, the format of a staff meeting, the cultural dress code.
It is the difference between setting a boundary and building a fence.
A boundary versus a fence. I like that.
Yet a boundary defines what is objectively true and essential. A fence is an extra barrier built out of anxiety, designed to keep people so far away from the boundary that they can't even see it.
That's a profound way to look at it.
When leaders treat third-order preferences, like whether someone works remotely or in the office, with the exact same intensity as first-order doctrines, like whether they are embezzling money, they aren't actually guarding the truth.
No, they are just weaponizing policy to protect their own comfort zone.
Yes. Once that rigid spine of core non-negotiables is genuinely secure, a beautiful dynamic unlocks. The movement earns the right to be entirely radically flexible in how it expresses itself locally.
Which transitions perfectly into one of the most practical concepts in the source material. Sacred mission, servant method.
Sacred mission, servant method.
Yes. The principle is simple but incredibly difficult to execute. The mission is sacred. It cannot be altered. But the methods used to achieve that mission are servants.
Meaning they are entirely disposable.
Exactly. When an organization elevates a method to the status of a sacred law, any variation is wrongfully viewed as rebellion.
The manuscript uses the Apostle Paul as the ultimate case study in methodological flexibility, right?
It does. Paul famously wrote that he became all things to all people so that he might save some. He never altered the core gospel message. The spine remained rigid.
But he radically adapted his delivery, his vocabulary, his cultural approach based on his audience. He spoke one way to Jewish scholars debating in a synagogue and an entirely different way to Greek philosophers in a public marketplace.
The text also points to a massive historical crisis, the Acts 15 Council of Jerusalem.
Oh, this is a great example.
Yeah.
For context, the early church was exploding, and it was suddenly filled with two radically different demographics. Jewish believers who had thousands of years of strict dietary laws and cultural practices, and Gentile believers who had none of that background.
This psychological friction must have been immense.
The temptation for the established Jewish leaders would have been to force the Gentiles to adopt Jewish cultural uniformity like circumcision and dietary restrictions, simply to prove their loyalty to the new movement.
But they didn't. The Council of Jerusalem is a masterclass in separating mission from method.
What exactly did they do?
The leaders convened, debated fiercely, and ultimately realized that the core gospel did not require cultural uniformity. They handled Gentile inclusion not by forcing cultural sameness, but by a spirit-led consensus that protected the gospel while expanding the mission.
They recognized that the gospel could inhabit completely different cultural forms without ceasing to be the gospel.
They allowed the method to serve the mission.
We see the catastrophic failure of this principle constantly in the modern corporate and nonprofit worlds.
Oh, absolutely.
How often do we see a successful system and blindly copy-paste it into a completely different culture or context, only to watch it fail? You have a highly successful system, let's say a fast-paced, highly structured, aggressively metric-driven church model developed in a major urban center like New York.
Right. A leader in a slow-paced, deeply relational rural farming community sees that success, buys the books, and blindly copy-pastes the entire urban system into their rural context.
They elevate the method to a sacred status.
And then they are completely baffled when the system fails catastrophically and leaves the local community feeling alienated.
This highlights the severe danger of confusing success with universality. Just because a specific organizational model works brilliantly in one demographic does not mean it is a universal law of nature.
Success is a terrible teacher if it is not interpreted through the lens of wisdom and local context.
Exactly. When we copy-paste a method without translating it, we subjugate the people to the process.
Going back to our garden analogy, if a farmer realizes his tomato plants are producing record-breaking yields in the blazing full sun, and he decides to uproot his delicate ferns and force them into the same full sun because, well, that's the successful method, he is going to incinerate the ferns.
The mission is growth. The method must adapt to the specific nature of the plant. But allowing for that kind of local freedom requires a very specific type of leader. It requires someone who leads through influence, not control.
Which brings us to the profound difference between a title and true authority. The text frames this as carrying the weight of heaven.
The weight of heaven. I love that phrase. It draws a sharp, painful line between positional authority and spiritual authority.
This raises an important question. If someone obeys your directive, are they complying with your title out of fear for their job, or are they following your spiritual influence because they deeply trust your character?
That is the ultimate diagnostic question. Because positional authority is entirely external, isn't it?
Yes. It is derived entirely from titles, access codes, organizational rank. It is authority granted by an institution.
Whereas spiritual authority is internal. It is forged through character, profound alignment with core principles, and an undeniable inner gravity.
The manuscript illustrates this by looking at Jesus' teaching in the synagogues. The crowds were astonished because he taught as one having authority and not as the scribes.
Because the scribes derived all their authority positionally. Their influence relied on citing older, dead rabbis and leaning on their institutional credentials.
Exactly. Jesus possessed intrinsic authority. It wasn't borrowed from a human institution. It flowed directly from his perfect, hidden obedience and alignment with the Father.
Positional authority can force a body to move. You can use it as a mechanical lever. You can threaten to fire an employee or demote them. They will comply to survive.
But only spiritual authority can move a heart. It invites followership rather than demanding compliance.
The text issues a severe warning about the danger of leaders leaning on their titles to compensate for their lack of inward weight, doesn't it?
It does. When a leader's private life is fragmented, when their character is eroding behind closed doors, they instinctively know they are losing the trust of their people.
And to compensate, they inevitably tighten their administrative grip. They start utilizing arbitrary policies, veiled threats, and strict hierarchy to maintain order.
Because they completely lack the spiritual gravity to invite people to follow them naturally.
That phrase, wait, is so perfect. It's the moral credibility that anchors a room when you walk into it, and you can't microwave that weight. The author notes that spiritual authority is forged exclusively in hidden places.
In prayer, repentance, telling the truth when it costs you.
Yes, it's the weight of heaven resting on a life of integrity. When you carry that kind of weight, you don't have to scream, threaten, or manipulate to get people to listen.
And when a movement is filled with leaders who genuinely carry that true spiritual weight, the entire culture shifts. They stop competing with each other.
They don't suffer from the paranoia of the owned ministry. They don't need to build fortresses to protect their fragile egos.
They start doing something revolutionary. They recognize each other.
Which brings us to the final major section, mutual recognition. Trust as the infrastructure of mission.
The text posits that unity requires more than paper agreements. It requires the spiritual discipline of seeing and honoring other laborers in the field.
Okay, but how do you practically build this? How do you move from polite distance to genuine mission-advancing trust? Because we have all sat in corporate seminars where everyone pledges to support each other, but underneath it's just polite distance.
Trust is not a vague, warm feeling you can artificially manufacture. It is a structure of repeated integrity.
Repeated integrity.
It means telling the truth plainly, keeping promises that cost you resources, sharing credit for a victory, and, most profoundly, celebrating another's fruit, even when you didn't produce it.
Can I celebrate a massive win for a rival company doing good work when my name gets zero credit? That's the crucible.
The author points to John the Baptist as the supreme historical example of this ultimate display of recognition.
John the Baptist, he was the ultimate rock star of his era, right?
Yeah.
He had massive crowds, intense loyalty.
Then Jesus begins his public ministry and the crowds start shifting. John's disciples panic. They approach John with what is essentially a market share crisis.
Right. They say, Rabbi, everyone is going to M.
And John's response requires a staggering level of ego death. He says, he must increase, but I must decrease.
He must increase, but I must decrease.
Wow. John recognized the true source of authority. He didn't view Jesus as a competitor. He viewed him as the fulfillment of the shared mission.
That is the complete transition from a fortress mentality, keeping others out, defending turf, to a field mentality, working alongside others in a harvest bigger than any one person.
Exactly. Evaluating initiatives by whether they strengthen the overall mission, not just whether they strengthen the center's influence. It's collaboration without control.
So let's summarize this incredible narrative arc we've traced today.
Let's do it.
We started by dismantling the illusion of uniformity, that anxiety-driven factory mindset that tries to clone behavior. We redefined togetherness as a diverse, living garden anchored by a shared composition.
Mirroring the Trinity.
Right. We then exposed the hidden poison of the own ministry, where stewardship rots into territorialism. To cure that, we discussed building the spine of the body guarding the non-negotiables.
Which then allows the movement to experience the freedom of expression, the servant method.
And to survive that flexibility, you need leaders who don't hide behind positional titles, but foster the spiritual weight and trust that holds it all together.
It really is a profound roadmap.
So bringing this directly back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
The ultimate value of this deep dive is clear. Whether you are leading a boardroom, a family, or a faith community, your ultimate goal is never to manufacture clones.
Never.
Uniformity is a cheap substitute for real unity. Your mandate is to cultivate a living organism where wildly diverse parts are fiercely united around an unshakable center.
I will leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. The text relentlessly emphasizes that true unity requires dying to the self.
Which is so countercultural.
Completely. Consider how, in an era obsessed with personal branding and individual platform building, the most radical, disruptive, and genuinely powerful leadership move you can make tomorrow might be something entirely different.
What is it?
It is to intentionally build a stage for someone else, someone whose style is completely different from yours, simply because you share the same ultimate mission.
Wow. Building a stage for someone else whose style is totally different from yours. That is powerful.
It changes everything.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this gave you an entirely new framework for togetherness. Keep exploring, keep asking the hard questions, and we'll see you next time.